Welcome to Module 3 of the subjunctive. In this video, we're going to look at another set of triggers that pop up all the time in regular, everyday conversation. In grammar, these are referred to as impersonal expressions. Things like, it's good that, it's bad that, it's important that, it's necessary that, it's fantastic that, it's possible that, it's incredible that, it's sad that. Here we have all of those triggers translated into Spanish, and you can see how they form a nice little group. So we have es bueno que, es malo que, es importante que, es necesario que, es fantástico que, es posible que, es increíble que, es triste que. And there are others, but these ones you'll find that you'll use a lot. What I'd like you to do is pause the video and run up and down them to make sure that you're familiar with them, because we're going to practice using them with the subjunctive next. I'll get you started with the first one. It's good that you're here today. This would be, es bueno que estés aquí hoy. Here we have our trigger, es bueno que, followed by estar in the subjunctive. So instead of estás aquí, it becomes estés aquí, finally with hoy. How would you say, it's bad that you drink so much coffee each day? For the verb to drink, you can use tomar. Es malo que tomes tanto café cada día. It's important that we study for the exam next week. To say next week would be de la próxima semana. Es importante que estudiemos para el examen de la próxima semana. If you chose to go with por instead of para, because the reason why it's important that we're studying is this exam for next week, that would also be acceptable. It's just that in this particular sentence, para sounds slightly more natural. It's necessary that we call her tonight. Es necesario que le llamemos esta noche. We could also throw that into the negative and say, it's not necessary that we call her tonight. This again will trigger the subjunctive. How would you say it? No es necesario que le llamemos esta noche. It's fantastic that his parents cook for you. Es fantástico que sus padres or sus papás cocinen para ti. It's possible that he's depressed and alone. The word for alone is solo. Es posible que esté deprimido y solo. It's incredible that he eats so much chocolate every day. Es increíble que coma tanto chocolate todos los días. Let's look at even more examples. It's good that he writes to his family each week. Be very careful with this one. Es bueno que le escriba a su familia cada semana. Hopefully, you remember to put in the redundant le. In this sentence structure, it's necessary and all native speakers will do it. So we have, it's good that to it, he's writing to his family each week. Now, why to it? As soon as we say family in our English minds, we visualize plural. But la familia is a singular word in Spanish. and grammar will obey that. So because we're referring to la familia, we're saying le and not les to it. If you did say les, you would still be perfectly understood and it wouldn't necessarily be heard as that big a mistake. Still, le is correct because we're talking about a singular word here, la familia. The second thing is that we needed the personal a, because here we have people, a verb followed by people. So we needed to throw in the personal a. You can see how sometimes simple phrases on the surface can actually be quite intricate in Spanish. It's important that you wait here. Es importante que esperes aquí. It's fantastic that they're here with us today. Es fantástico que estén aquí con nosotros hoy. It's possible that they live here. Es posible que vivan aquí. It's incredible that he speaks Spanish so quickly. Es increíble que hable el español tan rápido. It's sad that he still lives with his parents. Es triste que todavía viva con sus padres. Earlier, I mentioned that there were even more impersonal expressions than what we've covered in this small group in the video. For example, it's regrettable that. In Spanish, this would be es lamentable que. This triggers the subjunctive just like all the others. Or it's a shame that. This would be es una pena que. You could also say es una lástima que. You will see this as well. Es una lástima que. Again, it fits into this group of impersonal expressions. It's best that. Es mejor que. As you can see, the list can go on and on of these types of expressions. Here they are again in Spanish. There are more of them, but I'm sure with this list, you'll be more than covered for most speaking situations. Let's continue with part 2. What I'm going to do is give you 4 examples of common phrases in Spanish that trigger the subjunctive. Now, I often refer to these kinds of phrases as glue. This is something that we've come across in the course before. That's because they help glue sentences together. The first example is para que. Now, this means in order that or so that. We're already very used to using para, meaning in order to. But there are also situations, speaking situations and contexts where you'll need to use in order that or so that, in which case you'll extend it from para into para que. Now, as soon as you do that, you will trigger the subjunctive. Here's an example sentence for you. I'm going to ask for his number so I can call him later. Now, as we know, whenever the word that is implied in English, we must put it in Spanish. So this sentence becomes, I'm going to ask for his number so that I can call him later. Translated, this becomes, voy a pedirle su número para que pueda llamarle más tarde. Now, there's a lot going on in this sentence, so let's go through it. First of all, I'm going to voy a. And then to ask for information, we're going to kind of request this information. So we're using the verb pedir instead of preguntar. And we are requesting to him. So voy a pedir to him. So it becomes voy a pedirle su número. I'm going to request to him his number. Now we have in order that para que. This is our trigger and why it goes into pueda instead of puede. Para que pueda llamarle. So that I might be able to call him or to call to him later. This is quite an advanced sentence, but hopefully you get the idea of seeing how para que, this piece of glue, in order that, triggers the subjunctive. Let's look at some more examples. I need to leave now so that I can arrive on time. This becomes necesito irme ahora para que pueda llegar a tiempo. So I need to leave, necesito irme, now ahora, so that, or in order that, para que I might be able, pueda llegar a tiempo. Here's another one. I'm here so that I can find out the truth. Again, you could leave the word that out in English and have it sound perfectly natural. I'm here so I can find out the truth. But because the word that is implied, in Spanish it must be put in, and that forces us into using para que, so that, or in order that, I can find out the truth. Translated, this becomes, estoy aquí para que pueda descubrir la verdad. Let's look at another. I stayed here so that I can help you. This becomes, me quedé para que pueda ayudarte. Here we're using the verb quedarse, to remain one's self. So, me quedé. In order that, para que, again, triggering, pueda ayudarte, so that I can help you. Try this one on your own. I'm preparing everything so that it's ready. How would you say that? Estoy preparando todo para que esté listo. Let's try one more. I'm going to write myself a note so that I don't forget to do it. The verb to forget is olvidar. So try this one. How would you translate this into Spanish? It would be, voy a escribirme una nota para que no olvide hacerlo. So we have, I'm going to write, which would be voy a escribir, but I'm going to write myself, or to myself. Voy a escribirme, a note, una nota. So that, or in order that, para que I don't forget. Now normally, olvidar would be going to olvido. Olvido is I forget. But because we've triggered the subjunctive, becomes olvide. And you could even clarify it if you wanted to, para que, or it should be here actually, para que yo no olvide hacerlo. What I hope I've demonstrated to you is that sometimes you can't just use para. It's necessary, there's no other way around it, but to use para que, because we're applying in order that, or so that I can do it, so that I can call him, in order that I can see how much it is before I buy it. There's 1,000,001 examples where para que becomes necessary. And when that happens, you're forced into using the subjunctive. The next one we'll look at is a menos que. This means unless. Now, I don't want you to get it confused with al menos, which means at least. As you can see, they are quite similar. We have a menos que and al menos. Now, al menos doesn't normally trigger the subjunctive. For example, you could say, at least I'm here on time, which would be al menos estoy aquí a tiempo. You can see we have estoy. So this is regular. Al menos did not trigger the subjunctive. So don't get them confused. The one that we're looking at here is a menos que, meaning unless. Al menos, you just treat everything normally. Let's look at some example sentences now with a menos que. We have here, I'm not going to tell him unless it's absolutely necessary. First of all, how would you say it's necessary? Es necesario. In our sentence, we have unless it's necessary, and we know that unless is going to trigger the subjunctive. Now, the next verb coming up is es. And what is the infinitive of that? What's the full verb of es? Where is it coming from? What verb? It's coming from ser. Now, ser in the subjunctive is something we haven't done yet. So let's run quickly through it now. It looks like this. Sea, seas, sea, seamos, sean. This is the verb ser in the subjunctive, and as you can see, the key sound is sea. Sea, seas, sea, seamos, and sean. If we go back to our example sentence, we're going to need to use it. Because here we have unless triggering the subjunctive. Here it is coming from the verb ser. So I wonder if you could try to work out now how you would translate this into Spanish. No voy a decirle, a menos que sea absolutamente necesario. This is a very good example of something very natural, very common in everyday language. So I'm not going to tell him, no voy a decirle, unless, a menos que, here's our trigger. So instead of es absolutamente necesario, which is fine on its own, but because we've triggered the subjunctive, it forces us into sea, which is the subjunctive of ser. Now, I don't want you to worry too much about this because we're going to do a dedicated lesson on using ser in the subjunctive. So I certainly don't expect that you will learn this right here and now, just in this one instance. We're going to be coming back to it. Let's try this one. I'm not going to start unless I'm ready. How would you say that? No voy a empezar a menos que esté listo, or if you are female, you will say lista. These last two sentences bring us to an interesting point, which we are going to cover in much more detail quite soon. You can see that this concept in Spanish of ser versus estar also runs through the subjunctive, because in one sentence we had it's absolutely necessary, which is on the ser side, so we went into sea. However, I'm not going to start unless I'm ready. Being ready, we use estar. For example, estoy listo. So that's why it went into the subjunctive side of estar. You can see that this theme in Spanish of ser or estar runs right the way through, even into the subjunctive. When you're just learning to make the differentiation between them, the key is to go back to the present tense, just like I instructed you to do earlier. Because I said, how would you say simply it's necessary in the present tense? And right away, most of you probably went to es necesario. So you knew that you were on the ser side, and that would take you into sea. Equally for this sentence, we have unless I'm ready. So you just isolate it and say, well, how would I simply say I'm ready in the present tense, which is estoy listo. So now you know that you are on the estar side, and that will push you into esté. That approach will certainly help you a lot, and we'll be doing dedicated lessons on this quite soon. Here's one more for you to try. I'm not going to do it unless they pay me. I've put the verb pagar at the bottom there to help you. So how would you say it? No voy a hacerlo a menos que me paguen. Normally it would be pagan because the verb is pagar. However, a menos que forces us into the subjunctive with this verb, me paguen. The phrase in case that is something we use a lot in our own everyday English. In Spanish, it would be en caso de que. This phrase triggers the subjunctive. I'll give you an example sentence and then a couple for you to try on your own. Look at this one. We have, I'll leave a note for him on the table in case we arrive home late. This would be, voy a dejar una nota para él en la mesa, en caso de que lleguemos tarde a la casa. First of all, we have I'll leave, which could also mean I'm going to leave. So we can use voy a dejar una nota, going to leave a note. for him, para él, and on the table, en la mesa. Now we have our trigger in case that, en caso de que. Instead of llegamos for we arrive, it pushes us into lleguemos. In case that we arrive late home, en caso de que lleguemos tarde a la casa. So here you can see the trigger forcing the subjunctive. Let's see if you can try a couple on your own. Did you make a copy of the key in case we lose it? The verb to lose is perder, so try to say this in Spanish. ¿Hiciste una copia de la llave en caso de que la perdamos? Here we have did you make. Remember that hacer is to do or to make. So did you make a copy of the key? An event, right? Hiciste una copia de la llave. Now we have our trigger in case that en caso de que. Now the verb perder ends in er. So it changes sides. Instead of perdemos, it goes into perdamos. En caso de que la perdamos. La because we're referring to la llave. Let's do one more. We are buying some flowers now in case they forget to do it later. The verb to forget is olvidar. So try to translate this now. Estamos comprando unas flores ahora, en caso de que olviden hacerlo más tarde. Here we have estamos comprando. This is especially obvious because we're using now, so this is an action that's going on right now. Estamos comprando unas flores, some flowers. Now the trigger, in case that, en caso de que. Now we have olvidar, an AR verb, switching over to the other side. They forget olviden, to do it later, hacerlo más tarde. Sometimes you can avoid using the subjunctive, and this is a good example of that. We have the trigger antes de que, which is used for before. Now look at these examples. We have I always drink a glass of water before I eat, and I always drink a glass of water before eating. Is there any real difference in the meanings of those two sentences? I really don't think so, yet one will trigger the subjunctive and the other will not. So we have siempre tomo un vaso de agua antes de que coma. Here you can see the trigger antes de que, forcing us into coma, the subjunctive. So this would be the translation of the first one here. I always drink a glass of water before I eat. However, if instead you choose to go with before eating, you can avoid the subjunctive altogether. It becomes siempre tomo un vaso de agua antes de comer. You can see that by avoiding que and simply saying before eating antes de comer, we can avoid using the subjunctive altogether. Here's another example of that for you. Before we eat, I want to say a prayer. And below it we have before eating, I want to say a prayer. Again, there's no real difference between those two sentences, yet this one triggers the subjunctive and this one does not. So we have antes de que comamos, quiero decir una oración. So we have antes de que triggering the subjunctive comamos. But in the second one, we have before eating, antes de comer, quiero decir una oración. Here we have no subjunctive. Sometimes, however, there isn't a way around it. Look at this sentence. I'm not going to start before I'm ready. Here we can't really find a way around not using the subjunctive. So how would you say that in Spanish? No voy a empezar antes de que esté listo or lista. This one has been quite a long lesson, so let's look over what we covered. Basically, we had 4 pieces of glue in Spanish, little phrases that help you to connect sentences together. We have para que, a menos que, en caso de que, antes de que. All the way down the line, you see the trigger que, and que. The only one out here, or the odd one out, was antes de que, where if you say antes de que, if you step on it, you have to use the subjunctive. However, there's often a way to rephrase what you're saying in English, so you're not using the word que, and instead you're just saying antes de with the verb. Antes de comer, antes de hablar, whatever. So there we have a little out, a way around the subjunctive. But in all the others, we do not. As soon as you step on them, you're going to be forced into the subjunctive. So this is an example of how glue can also work as triggers for the subjunctive in Spanish. Let's continue with part 3. So far, we've looked at things that pretty much always trigger the subjunctive, and often there's no way to get around it. However, not all the subjunctive works so rigidly. Sometimes you can step on a trigger but still have a choice over whether you use the subjunctive. Now, one of these opportunities arises when you're talking about whether or not something happens normally. For example, let's take the word cuando. Now, cuando will sometimes trigger the subjunctive and sometimes will not. Let's compare these two sentences. We have, I drink lots of margaritas when I'm in Mexico. Below it we have, I will drink lots of margaritas when I'm in Mexico. Both sentences use the word when, meaning cuando, but only one will trigger the subjunctive. The key to understanding it is that whenever you are describing behavior that normally happens, usually happens, always happens, this will not trigger the subjunctive. This is what is happening in this first sentence, because what it's implying is I usually drink lots of margaritas when I'm in Mexico, or I normally drink lots of margaritas, I always drink lots of margaritas when I'm in Mexico. This first sentence is describing normal, regular, repetitive behavior, whereas the second sentence is not doing that. It's saying, I will drink lots of margaritas when I'm in Mexico, but there's no indication that that's ever happened before. Now, in this example, where you are not expressing this idea of normally, always, or usually, this will trigger the subjunctive after the word cuando. Let's look at some more examples. In this sentence we have, I'm happy when you're here, followed by, I'll be happy when you're here. Now the first one is saying that I'm normally happy when you're here, usually always happy when you're here. This is describing normal behavior. So we have, estoy feliz cuando estás aquí. You can see that after the word cuando, there is no subjunctive, because we're saying that this is normal for us, repetitive, normal, regular, usual behavior, that whenever you're here, I'm happy. But in the second example, we have I will be or I'll be happy when you're here. Now, this one will trigger the subjunctive after when, because there's no indication that maybe we've ever met before. Maybe we've been in contact online and you're going to arrive and we'll meet for the first time, and I'm saying I'll be happy when you're here. It doesn't have that same repetitive, usual, always, normally feel about it. So this one would be voy a estar feliz cuando estés aquí, when you might be here. Let's continue. I always call you whenever I'm in Mexico. Now here this one is much clearer because we have the word always. So this is repetitive behavior, normal, usual behavior that we always call you whenever we're in Mexico. So we have siempre te llamo cuando estoy en México. Here we have no subjunctive. Cuando estoy en México. But if we contrast that with I'll call you when I'm in Mexico, now we've lost that sense. It may be repetitive, it may be not. It may be normal, it may be not. Maybe this is the first time I'm ever going to Mexico and I'm telling you that when I'm in Mexico, I'll call you. So the difference here is voy a llamarte cuando esté en México. I'm going to call you when I might be in Mexico. Can you see the difference there? How one is clearly describing regular normal behavior, that I always call you whenever I'm in Mexico or when I'm in Mexico, whereas the other is not so clear. Look at this next one. I normally say hello to Francisco when I see him around here. Now that could be equally I always say hello or I usually say hello to Francisco when I see him. So we have normalmente le digo hola a Francisco cuando lo veo. No subjunctive here at all. This is just the regular verb when I see him. However, if we were instead to say when I see him, I'll say hello. Again, maybe it's the first time we'll ever see him. There's no sense of repetitive, normal, usual behavior in this phrase. So after the word cuando, we're going to have cuando lo vea. Voy a saludarle. Going to say hello to him. You can see that instead of cuando lo veo, we've switched into the subjunctive. Cuando lo vea. Whenever or when I might see him, I'm going to say hello. So what we have here is the key principle behind it. If you're describing something that normally happens, regular, repetitive, usual behavior, then there's no subjunctive required after the word cuando. Let's run a little drill. All you have to do is decide if you would use the subjunctive or not after the word when in the following sentences. So we have here, I kiss my wife every day when I get home from work. If you were saying that in Spanish, would you use the subjunctive after the word when? This one is no subjunctive because it's regular or describing regular usual behavior. I normally, usually, always kiss my wife every day when I get home from work. I hug my kids when they need my support. Subjunctive or no subjunctive? This one is no subjunctive. Again, we're describing regular behavior. I normally, usually, always hug my kids when they need my support. I'm going to tell you what happened when I see you. This one would trigger the subjunctive. It doesn't have the same feel or clarity of the others. We don't know if it's normal behavior or not. If we changed it to I always, let's change like this. I always tell you what happened when I see you. Usually or normally tell you what happened when I see you every day after work. Now we have very regular, very normal, usual behavior, and so the subjunctive won't be triggered. However, I'm going to tell you what happened when I see you doesn't have that same feel about it, and it would trigger the subjunctive. What about this one? I can do it when I get home. This one would trigger the subjunctive. I don't know when I'll be there. This again would trigger the subjunctive. Finally, let's compare and contrast these two. I love to surf when I'm on vacation. Would you use the subjunctive or not? This one is no subjunctive. We're implying that I normally love to surf, usually love to surf, always love to surf when I'm on vacation. However, I'm going to try surfing when I'm on vacation. This one would trigger the subjunctive. You see, it's not nearly as clear. For all we know, it could be the first time that you're ever going to try surfing. So I'm going to try surfing when I'm on vacation. There's no more information than that. We're not describing or making it clearly implied that this is regular behavior for us. So after the word when, this will trigger the subjunctive. Now this concept in Spanish isn't just limited to the word cuando. It also applies to many other words as well. I have a list for you of the most common ones you'll come across. We have cuando, which is when, después de que is after, hasta que, until, mientras, while, and tan pronto como, meaning as soon as. The same principle applies to all the words in this list. Sometimes they will trigger the subjunctive, sometimes they won't. It depends on whether or not the behavior you are describing is regular, normal behavior or not. So in part 4 coming up next, I'll give you examples of how that exact same principle is going to apply to the other words in this list. Welcome to part 4. Let's dive deeper now into this list of words that will sometimes trigger the subjunctive and sometimes will not. The next one in our list is después de que, which is used for after. So let's look at this example sentence. We watch TV after we study each night. This immediately suggests regular behavior. So we have vemos la tele después de que estudiamos cada noche. Here the verb is estudiar, and so we have estudiamos. So it's indicative, it's not subjunctive, just treated normally. However, in this next sentence we have, my mom said we can watch TV after we study for the exam. Now this sentence feels very differently. Maybe it's not normal at all that we're allowed to do that. Just on this occasion, our mom said that we can do it after studying. So we have, mi mamá dijo que podemos ver la tele después de que estudiemos para el examen. You can see that now we have estudiemos instead of estudiamos, because después de que has triggered the subjunctive, meaning that there's no indication that this is in any way normal or usual repetitive behavior. Now there's something important that I would like to bring to your attention at this point. If you remember, we had before antes de que, and this would always trigger the subjunctive, including this que. But we could get around it with some sentences by only using antes de followed by the full verb. Now we can do the exact same thing with después de que. So if you put in the que, you're forced into using the subjunctive. However, if you just use después de followed by the full verb, you can avoid using the subjunctive altogether. Now let's go back to that same example sentence to demonstrate this. We have, my mom said we can watch TV after we study for the exam. This was the one that triggered the subjunctive. Now, if we were to say, instead of after we study, we replaced it for after studying for the exam. Now, we can simply say, mi mamá dijo que podemos ver la tele después de estudiar para el examen. Here we're using después de followed by the full verb, meaning, go back here, my mom said we can watch TV after studying for the exam. So this can be very useful. We have antes de with the full verb or después de with the full verb as a way of avoiding or going around the subjunctive. Let's take another example sentence. We have, I should drink a glass of water after I eat. The verb is comer, so this is going to trigger the subjunctive, right? Because we're not indicating that this is normal behavior or something repetitive that we normally do. So how would you translate this into Spanish? Debería tomar un vaso de agua antes de que coma. So after I might eat. Now, if we switch this, and instead of saying after I eat, we simply say after eating, which is really the same thing. I should drink a glass of water after eating. Now we can avoid the subjunctive by simply using después de followed by the full verb. So how would you do that? Debería tomar un vaso de agua después de comer. Now, while this is a neat trick, remember that it's not always possible to get around it in this way. It really depends on the sentence itself. But in any case, it's good to know because it gives you an opportunity to take the easier route where it's possible. The next word in our list is hasta que, which is used for until. Look at this sentence. I work until 9 o'clock. This implies that it's something regular, repetitive, that it's normal for us. I work until 9 o'clock. We could make it even more obvious by saying I work every day until 9 o'clock. So we would have trabajo hasta que son las 9. I work until it's 9 o'clock. Son las 9. But if we contrast that now with this example, tonight I have to work until 9 o'clock. Suddenly this sentence feels different because it sounds like it's more of a one-off thing or an unusual thing, that tonight I have to work until 9 o'clock. So instead we have esta noche tengo que trabajar hasta que sean las 9. Here we have son, they are the 9, son las 9, and here we have sean las 9, the subjunctive of ser. At this point, I'd like to remind you or confirm to you that it's not so important if you're able to translate these perfectly yet, but more important is that you understand the principle of why some of them trigger the subjunctive and others do not. This is what we're really focusing on now, understanding the principle behind it. Next up, we have tan pronto como, which literally means as soon as. Tan pronto como. In this sentence, we have I always call you as soon as I arrive. This one is obvious. Siempre te llamo tan pronto como llego. Here we have the verb llegar and I arrive, llego. So no subjunctive after tan pronto como. But let's compare it with this one. As soon as I arrive, I'll call you. So this does not have the same feel. I always call you as soon as I arrive versus as soon as I arrive, I'll call you. Now, tan pronto como is going to trigger the subjunctive. So we have tan pronto como llegue, te llamo. As soon as I might arrive, I'll call you. The last one in our list is mientras, which is used for while. Now, this is a tricky one. It's even more delicate. Look at this example. We have my sister waits here while I buy a coffee. What's going on is two actions happening at the same time. So they're happening simultaneously. So my sister is waiting here, and at the same time, I'm buying a coffee, separated by the word while. Now, in these situations, there's no subjunctive after mientras, where you have two actions happening simultaneously, as in this example. My sister waits, and at the same time, I'm buying a coffee. You don't need to use the subjunctive after while. So the sentence would be, mi hermana espera aquí mientras compro un café. Here you can see clearly I buy with compro, treated normally. Now, in order for mientras to trigger the subjunctive, the English sentence must imply as long as. So, for example, I won't go out as long as it's raining. You could also say I won't go out while it's raining. But it's important in order to make a correct decision about whether to use the subjunctive after mientras that you're able to substitute this into your English. So you could say, I won't go out as long as it's raining. Okay, so this is now a trigger for the subjunctive, this phrase, as long as. But you might also say in English, I won't go out while it's raining. The important thing is that in the background, this phrase, as long as, is being implied. And when that happens, you trigger the subjunctive. So we have, no voy a salir mientras esté lloviendo. The verb for to rain is llover, so we have esté lloviendo. Again, don't worry if you're not able to pick the translations, just worry about understanding the principle at this point. Here's another one for you. I won't go back to work as long as they treat me this way. So you could equally say I won't go back to my work while they're treating me this way. In any case, this is being implied. As long as this is going on, I won't do something else. When you have that sense implied in English, you're going to trigger the subjunctive. So we have, No voy a regresar a mi trabajo mientras me traten. Remember, the verb to treat is tratar, an AR verb, but here it's gone into the subjunctive because this mientras is implying as long as they're treating me badly or treating me this way, I'm not going to go back to work. So this is the delicate key that we must be aware of when using the word mientras for while. When things are happening at the same time, there's no subjunctive. For example, I did this while she was doing that. So we have two actions happening simultaneously. More examples could be, I watched TV while she cooked dinner. Or I prepared dessert while the lasagna was cooking in the oven. You see, these are actions happening simultaneously, so no subjunctive after mientras. It's only when mientras or while is suggesting as long as, when that's being implied in English, then it will trigger the subjunctive. For example, I won't swim in the sea while there are sharks. This implies I won't swim in the sea as long as there are sharks. Or, I can't buy it while it's so expensive. You could also imply I can't buy it as long as it's so expensive. Or even rephrase it, as long as it's so expensive, I can't buy it. One more, I won't bother cleaning the house while the workers are here. Implying there's no point cleaning the house as long as the workers are here. You can see that in every example, we were able to use the word while in English. And this is what you will do in Spanish. You will use mientras. The important thing is that this mientras or while is implying at the same time in English as long as. As long as this situation is going on, I can't do this other thing. This is the key to understanding when the word mientras triggers the subjunctive. Before closing out this video, I'd like to confirm to you that yes, this is very delicate stuff, but we're going to be doing a lot of practice, which should give you a very good understanding of how it works. If you're feeling unsure, fuzzy, hazy about it so far, then that's completely normal because all I'm really doing is just introducing these new concepts to you. Coming up, we're going to have a lot of questions and drills, which will give you a lot of practical practice. And by the end of that, you should end up feeling quite solid and secure about everything that we've covered. That's very important because it's only when you feel solid and secure in these concepts that you'll actually be able to use them in your spoken Spanish. In part 5, I have something interesting for you. There's a telephone company in Mexico called Telmex, and recently I received an email from them. The subject line read, "Donde estés, estamos." What this is implying is, wherever you might be, we are. Donde estés, estamos. Now the question is, why is this important? It's important because it means that sometimes the subjunctive can be used without any trigger at all. Donde estés, estamos. There's a difference in meaning. If it said, donde estás, so we have here the indicative, normal mode, no subjunctive. It means wherever you are, we are. Donde estás, estamos. However, by changing it into the subjunctive, the meaning now became lighter. It became softer. Wherever you might be, wherever you may be, we are. Here we have the subjunctive being used just on its own to imply this softer touch. And this is interesting because so far we've looked at forced triggers such as espero que. These are very rigid. There's nowhere else to go. They always force you into the subjunctive. Then we looked at other triggers like cuando or mientras, which I call maybe triggers. Sometimes they trigger the subjunctive, sometimes they don't. Now, in this lesson, we're looking at the subjunctive being used without any triggers at all. So we have donde estés, estamos. Let's look at another example. We could take the sentence, no one knows where he is. And you could simply say, nadie sabe dónde está. There's no subjunctive here at all. Everything is regular. No one knows where he is. However, you could also say, nadie sabe dónde esté. Here we have switched into the subjunctive, and this changes the meaning into something like, no one knows where he might be. Here we have again the word might. No one knows where he might be. Nadie sabe dónde esté. Once again, the subjunctive being used independently, just on its own, to express this idea of might. Here's another example for you. We could say it's better, or what about if we extend it, it's better like that. It's better like that. So you could have es mejor así. So this is all regular. Es coming from the verb ser. Es mejor así. It's better like that. But you could also say sea mejor así. Let's put it in. Sea mejor así. Now the meaning changes to it might be better like that. Once again, it's better like that. Es mejor así. But it might be better like that. Sea mejor así. Here again, we have the subjunctive without any trigger. We're simply using it to convey this idea of might. Now, if we look back over what we've covered so far, you can see how this feeling of might permeates and runs through all the subjunctive, regardless if it's a forced trigger, a maybe trigger, or as we've seen here, no trigger at all. For example, we have cuando estés aquí, puedes llamarle. What we're expressing here is, when you might be here, can you call him? In English, we would say, when you're here, can you call him? But this idea of might is being introduced by the subjunctive. When you might be here, can you call him? Here's another. Me gustaría que cocine más frecuentemente para ti. What we're saying is that I would like that he or she might cook more frequently for you. This one, lo hago tan pronto como tenga el tiempo. Tenga is the subjunctive of tener, which we haven't done yet. But what we're saying is, I'll do it as soon as I might have the time. You can see again the word might being implied here with the subjunctive. The reason I'm showing you this now is that regardless of the trigger, whether it's forced, maybe, or no trigger at all, this sensational feeling of the word might permeates and runs through the subjunctive. Not always, but very, very often. And just out of curiosity, I'll mention this to you. Native Spanish speakers will bring this idea of the subjunctive into their English. And they'll often say things like, when you might be here, can you whatever? Because in Spanish, that's what they're used to doing. They're used to saying, cuando estés aquí, puedes llamarle para mí? Can you call him for me? Because they would use typically the subjunctive in this context, they will then translate that directly into English, and you'll hear them saying frequently, when you might be here. Another example would be, I'll tell you when you might arrive home. They'll often say this as well, using the word might. Of course, in English, we would say, I'll tell you when you arrive home. We wouldn't put might into it. But in Spanish, the translation of this sentence would be, voy a decirte cuando llegues. Here we have the subjunctive. So for a native Spanish speaker, they will take this llegues and they'll translate it into might and say that in English. Now, I always enjoy hearing them do this for two reasons. One, it's a reminder to me of just how natural using the subjunctive is to them. Secondly, it's confirmation of how they convert the idea of the subjunctive into the word might in English. It's also nice to know that they basically do the same as us, just in reverse. In other words, they try to make English conform to what they're already used to in Spanish. But as you probably all know by now, in order to really learn a foreign language, you first have to let go of your own. You have to be willing to embrace, to be open to another way of doing things. Let's continue with part 6. One of the really nice things about Spanish is just how easy it is to express or talk about the future. Voy a, pasa, va, vamos a, and van a. But perhaps something that some of you didn't know is that you can also talk about the future using the subjunctive as well. The good news is that it's just as easy. Let's look at this sentence. It reads, I'm going to be able to do it. How would you translate that? Voy a poder hacerlo. Here we have 3 verbs in a row. I'm going to be able to do it. Voy a poder hacerlo. Our next sentence is slightly extended. It reads, I hope that I'm going to be able to do it. Now, I hope that is a trigger for the subjunctive. So, if you translated this as espero que voy a poder hacerlo, it would immediately be heard as a mistake in Spanish. That is because we've stepped on the trigger of espero que, which means that we can no longer use voy a. We have to use the subjunctive. So the correct way would be espero que vaya a poder hacerlo. Here you can see the subjunctive of I'm going to. Now here's what it looks like. We're used to voy a, vas a, va, vamos a, and van a, but when the subjunctive is triggered and we need to express the future, the key sound becomes vaya, and you're going to separate the a afterwards. So it's vaya a, vayas a, vaya a, vayamos a, vayan a. Translated, this means I'm going to, you're going to, he, she, or it is going to, we're going to, and they're going to. The only difference is that this is what it looks like after the subjunctive has been triggered. It would be good now just to pause the screen and to run up and down this list a few times to familiarize yourself with the sound. Remember that, unlike before, we can't contract it all together. Because of the way this is spelled, we'll often need to separate it. Vaya a, vayas a, vaya a, vayamos a, vayan a. Let's go back to that previous sentence. I hope that I'm going to be able to do it. How would you translate that now? Espero que vaya a poder hacerlo. Here you could see how I split my pronunciation. Vaya a poder hacerlo. How would you say, I hope that you're going to be able to do it? Espero que vayas a poder hacerlo. I hope that he, she, or it is going to be able to do it. Espero que vaya a poder hacerlo. I hope that we're going to be able to do it. Espero que vayamos a poder hacerlo. I hope that they're going to be able to do it. Espero que vayan a poder hacerlo. Let's move on and use some other triggers. We have here, I don't think he's going to be here on time. The trigger for the subjunctive is I don't think, which is no creo que. So how would you translate this? No creo que vaya a estar aquí a tiempo. Let's try another. I'm not sure they're going to tell him what happened. The trigger here is I'm not sure, which is no estoy seguro de que. So how would you translate this now? No estoy seguro de que vayan a decirle qué pasó. This one reads, it's not true that she's going to live here with me. Now, the trigger is, it's not true that. So it's, no es cierto que. How would you translate it? It would be, no es cierto que vaya a vivir aquí conmigo. I don't think we're going to be happy here. No creo que vayamos a estar felices aquí. We used felices instead of feliz because we're referring to we, something plural. This next one reads, I don't think that they're going to want to stay here. No creo que vayan a querer quedarse aquí. Literally, I don't think they're going to want. Remember that querer means to want, and then to stay themselves, quedarse aquí. Look at this next example. We have, she wants me to go to the store. Here we have, she wants that I go to the store. So the trigger is quiere que. Now, the translation of this would be quiere que vaya a la tienda. So she wants that I go, or I might go, that I might go to the store. How would you say, I want them to go to the store? Quiero que vayan a la tienda. They want us to go to the store for bread. The word for bread is pan. Quieren que vayamos a la tienda por pan. When you go to Spain, you have to visit Madrid. How would you say that? Cuando vayas a España, tienes que visitar a Madrid. It's important that you go to the dentist today. Es importante que vayas al dentista hoy. It's good that you're going to write a letter to your uncle. Es bueno que vayas a escribir una carta a su tío. It's sad that they're going to leave today. Es triste que vayan a irse hoy. So, to summarize, what we're normally used to is voy a, vas a, va, vamos a, and van a. However, as soon as you step on a trigger for the subjunctive, whether it be espero que, es importante que, es bueno que, and so forth, the key sound becomes vaya. Vaya a, vayas a. Vaya a, vayamos a, vayan a. Be a little careful with your pronunciation of we're going to. Make sure that the stress is falling over this part here, vayamos. You'll find that as we put these into practice, they'll become just as easy and just as familiar as what you're already used to. Welcome to part 7. What I'd like to talk about now is the ing tense. So this is where we're using the sounds of ando and yendo. Let's take this example sentence. He is living in that house. Now the verb to live is vivir, and if we want to express living, it goes to viviendo. So the sentence, he's living in that house, would be está viviendo en esa casa. This is something that we're very used to using already. Now, if we put a subjunctive trigger in front of that, for example, I don't think he's living in that house, and you said, no creo que está viviendo en esa casa, that would immediately be heard as a mistake. Because we have a subjunctive trigger, no creo que, we cannot keep using está. in its normal form. Instead, it must go to esté bebiendo. Now, what this means is that with the ing tense ando and yendo, if a subjunctive trigger comes before it, instead of using estoy, estás, está, estamos, están bebiendo, for example, that must all change into the subjunctive. So we have esté bebiendo, or estés bebiendo, estemos bebiendo, estén bebiendo. Let's practice some more. I'll walk you through it step by step. What's the verb to talk? Hablar. And how would you say talking? Hablando. How would you say she's talking? Está hablando. Now let's throw a subjunctive trigger in front of it and put it into a sentence. We have, I hope she's talking with him about the problem now. How would you translate that into Spanish? Espero que esté hablando con él sobre el problema ahora. Here you can see the change from está hablando into esté hablando because of the subjunctive trigger that we've stepped on. What's the verb to write? Escribir. How do you say writing? Escribiendo. Now say you're writing. Estás escribiendo. How would you say, I like that you're writing a letter to your mom? Me gusta que estés escribiendo una carta a tu mamá. What's the verb to learn? Aprender. How do you say learning? Aprendiendo. How would you say we're learning? Estamos aprendiendo. Now try this. It's important that we're learning Spanish. Es importante que estemos aprendiendo español. What's the verb to try? Tratar de. And how do you say trying? Tratando de. How do you say they're trying? Están tratando de. Now try this. It's possible that they're trying to call you now. Es posible que estén tratando de llamarte ahora. Just like all the other examples, when normally treated, we get están tratando de, whatever it may be, followed by the verb. But as soon as we stepped on a trigger, it's possible that es posible que. Now we had to change the formula into the subjunctive. So we got estén tratando de llamarte ahora. As you can see, our old friends are being influenced and affected by the subjunctive. We have the future changing from voy a into vaya, and our ing tenses changing from está into esté. And of course, you would follow those all the way down the line. Just like all the other verbs, as soon as we step on a trigger, you must change these into their subjunctive forms. In part 8, I'd like to focus on the verb ser. Normally, we're used to conjugating it as soy, eres, es, somos, and son. However, when a trigger for the subjunctive comes before this verb, the key sound gets transformed into sea. Let's compare the two side by side. On the left, you can see the verb conjugated in the normal way that we're used to. However, when it goes into the subjunctive, you can see the key sound transforms into sea. So we have sea, seas, sea, seamos, and sean. So in the subjunctive, this would be I am, you are, he, she, or it is, we are, and they are. As you should already know, ser is used for things relating to identity. For example, someone's profession. If we wanted to say, he's a doctor, how would you say that? Es médico. If you said es doctor, it's fine as well, but normally it's es médico. Now, if we put a subjunctive trigger in front of that, for example, I don't think he's a doctor. Now we have the subjunctive trigger here with I don't think. And you said, no creo que es médico. This would immediately be heard as an error, because you've stepped on a subjunctive trigger, but you have not gone into the subjunctive with the verb ser. The correct way would be no creo que sea médico. I don't think that he is a doctor. Let's choose another profession. We could take, say, a pilot. The word for pilot in Spanish is piloto. Piloto. How would you say he's a pilot? Es piloto. Now let's throw a subjunctive trigger into it. I don't think he's a pilot. How would you say that? No creo que sea piloto. Under the heading of identity, we have things like profession, which we've just looked at, but also the type of person that you are. For example, whether you're happy or depressed, meaning in general, not just today, but in general as a person, if you're positive or negative. Now, if we wanted to say, she's a happy person, here we are going to be going into ser because we are describing something about her overall identity. So, how would you say that in Spanish? Es una persona feliz. Now, look at this. We'll throw a subjunctive trigger in front of it. It's sad that she's not a happy person. This would become es triste que no sea una persona feliz. See how es got transformed into sea? Because of the subjunctive trigger we stepped on. It's sad that es triste que no sea una persona feliz. Do you remember the word for depressed? This would be deprimido or deprimida. How would you say he's a depressed person? Es una persona deprimida. Even though we're referring to him, masculine, the noun is persona, la persona. So this is why we went into deprimida instead of deprimido. Now let's throw a subjunctive trigger into it. I don't think he's a depressed person. How would you say that? No creo que sea una persona deprimida. Of course, there are many other triggers. For example, I hope she's happy. How would you say that? Espero que sea feliz. I want her to be happy. Quiero que sea feliz. It's sad that she's not happy. Es triste que no sea feliz. How do you say it's a shame that? You have two choices and either one will do. Es una lástima que or es una pena que. How would you say it's a shame that she's not happy? Let's go with lástima. Es una lástima que no sea feliz. Returning again to our theme of identity, we've looked at profession, the type of person you are, also your religion relates to your identity. The word for religious in Spanish is religioso or religiosa. The syllables will be re-li-hi-oso, religioso. How would you say she's very religious? Es muy religiosa. Now say, I don't think she's very religious. No creo que sea muy religiosa. The word for Catholic is católico or católica. It's important for pronunciation that your stress comes here over the O. Católico or católica. How would you say, I know he's Catholic? Sé que es católico. Now try, I'm not sure he's Catholic. No estoy seguro de que sea católico. Remember that for the trigger of I'm not sure, it's no estoy seguro de que. Let's try some more. Under identity, so far we have profession, type of person, religion, also your physical attributes. For example, whether someone is tall or short in height. How would you say he's very tall? Es muy alto. Now let's imagine that a girl is going on a blind date and she says to her friend, I hope that he's tall. How would she say that? Espero que sea alto. The word for fat is gordo or gorda. How would you say he's fat? Es gordo. What about he's not fat? No es gordo. Let's return now to our blind date. The girl is saying, I hope he's not fat. How would she say that? Espero que no sea gordo. What about if it was a man going on a blind date? He's saying, I hope she's not fat. How would he say it? Espero que no sea gorda. Let's do some more practice. Remember that our key sounds for the subjunctive with ser are sea, seas, sea, seamos, and sean. If you need to pause and run up and down that list a few times, do that now before we go into this next practice. How would you say, I hope that our neighbors are friendly? The word for friendly is going to be amables. Espero que nuestros vecinos sean amables. Here we have the trigger, espero que. Our neighbors, nuestros vecinos, that they might be friendly, sean amables. Try this one. I would like you to be a stronger person. The word for stronger is más fuerte. Me gustaría que seas una persona más fuerte. They want me to be a doctor. Quieren que sea médico. As we know, sea can mean I am, he is, she is, or it is. So if you wanted to clarify, perhaps it wasn't clear, you just throw in yo as your clarifier there. Quieren que yo sea médico. Now there's no doubt who you're referring to. You're saying I am with sea. How would you say, I want us to be friends? Quiero que seamos amigos. Isn't it interesting how even the simplest of sentences, I want us to be friends, can require using the subjunctive in Spanish? So, in summary, we already know that ser equals identity, meaning how someone would describe you, how you are perceived, also how you would describe other people and how they are perceived. So this relates to job or profession, religion, physical features, your nationality, the type of personality that you are. Examples of this would be, say, taking John. He's an accountant, he's not religious, he's tall, he's bold, and he's slim. He's from England, and he's an optimistic person. These are all things that relate to his identity. They have nothing to do with moods or emotions, which are more transitory in nature. Now, normally with ser we have soy, eres, es, somos, and son. But as soon as you step on a trigger, this will all change into sea, seas, sea, seamos, and sean. The important thing to hold on to is that the underlying principle, meaning that ser equals identity, remains the same. It's only that after you step on a trigger, the verb ser will transform into its subjunctive side. Welcome to part 9. We're going to stay on the theme of ser and estar. As we know, we have a choice that we constantly have to make in Spanish, meaning which one are you going to go with? This happens on the regular side when you're just conjugating the verbs normally, but it also happens on the subjunctive side. Let's compare them. Here we have on the left the subjunctive sound of ser, and on the right we have the subjunctive sound of estar. By now you're probably quite familiar with these because we've done examples and drills already. What we haven't done, however, is a drill where you have to choose between them in the subjunctive. Remember that ser will always be focused on identity. Another side use of ser is that it will relate to time, telling what time it is. On the estar side, we have mood and emotions, things that are more transitory in nature. And as a side use, we also use it for locations, saying where you are or where something is. So bearing that in mind, let's begin now. How would you say, it's good that he's a positive person? The choice here, aside from the translation, is that you must choose whether you're going to go with ser or estar and use the correct subjunctive form. Es bueno que sea una persona positiva. It's good that he's happy today. Es bueno que esté feliz hoy. I want my son to be a lawyer. The word for lawyer is abogado. Quiero que mi hijo sea abogado. I'm not sure that they're happy about this situation. No estoy seguro o segura de que estén felices sobre esta situación. I don't think you're a nice person. No creo que seas una persona amable. It's important for me that he's rich. Es importante para mí que sea rico. It's very important for me that she's slim. The word for slim is delgado or delgada. Es muy importante para mí que sea delgada. I would like you to be here with me now because I need your support. Me gustaría que estés aquí conmigo ahora, porque necesito tu apoyo. I need everyone to be calm now. The word for calm is tranquilo. Necesito que todos estén tranquilos ahora. You could also have said, necesito que todo el mundo esté tranquilo ahora. Here, todo el mundo is singular, so we have esté tranquilo. Whereas here, todos is plural, which is why we had estén tranquilos ahora. How would you say, she wants all her children to be doctors? Quiere que todos sus niños sean médicos. Our boss wants us to be more ambitious. The word for boss is jefe, and the word for ambitious is ambicioso. Nuestro jefe quiere que seamos más ambiciosos. So here you can see this idea in action. We have ser versus estar running through the subjunctive. The principles don't change. That's very important to hold on to. That foundation of whether you would go with ser or estar has not changed. It's the same. It's only the sounds that have changed, because ser will go into its subjunctive side and estar will go into its subjunctive side. The point of this drill was to demonstrate that fact to you. In part 10, I'd like to talk about reflexive verbs. Now, as we know, reflexive verbs are everywhere in Spanish. In fact, there's a lot of things that you cannot say unless you use a verb reflexively. Now, the question is, what happens to them in the subjunctive? Let's take the verb quedar. On its own, it means to remain. If you make it reflexive, meaning quedarse, it means to remain oneself. And they use this in Spanish to mean to stay. Now, if we conjugate it normally, it becomes me quedo, te quedas, se queda, nos quedamos, se quedan. This would be I stay myself, you stay yourself, he, she, or it stays himself, herself, or itself, we stay ourselves, and they say themselves. The big question then becomes, how would you conjugate it in the subjunctive? Now, what I'd like you to do is pause and try. We'll go back to the slide where it's just conjugated regularly. Now, you know that in the subjunctive, verbs defect over to the other side. So here with quedarse, we have an AR verb. So try to go down the list and conjugate it, but in the subjunctive form. The answer would be me quede, te quedes, se quede, nos quedemos, se queden. Putting them side by side, you can see how the verb has defected over to the other side. It was an AR verb, but it is behaving as though it was not, as if it were an ER or an IR verb. Notice that the pronouns didn't change at all. They remained stationary. It was simply that the main verb quedar switched sides and all of the reflexive pronouns remained stationary. This is the mechanics of how reflexive verbs work in the subjunctive. Let's try another. On its own, llamar means to call. But if we make it reflexive, meaning llamarse, now it means to call one's self. And we use this to say my name is or your name is and so forth. Now, conjugating it normally, we have me llamo, te llamas, se llama, nos llamamos, and se llaman. Here we have an AR verb, llamar. This means I call myself, you call yourself. He, she, or it calls himself, herself, or itself. We call ourselves, and they call themselves. Again, the question becomes, how would you conjugate it in the subjunctive? Again, pause and try, and I'll put the slide back up for you. It becomes me llame, te llames, se llame, nos llamemos, se yamen. You can see the same mechanic at work. This was an AR verb, but the main verb switched sides and behaved as though it were an ER or an IR verb. And just as before, all of the reflexive pronouns remained stationary. What I'm showing you here is that on the surface, reflexive verbs in the subjunctive look complicated. They look hard. But once you understand the mechanics going on underneath them, it helps to remove the mystery and they get a lot easier to manage. Let's work a bit more with quedarse. First of all, how would you say I stay? Me quedo. I stay here. Me quedo aquí. Now let's introduce a subjunctive trigger. He wants me to stay here. Firstly, how would you rephrase that? It becomes, he wants that I stay here. Now try to say that in Spanish. Quiere que me quede aquí. Here you see the trigger, he wants, quiere que. So instead of me quedo, the reflexive verb changed into me quede. This is another example of such a simple sentence, such an ordinary thing to say, he wants me to stay here. Yet in Spanish, it would require the use of a reflexive verb and in the subjunctive. How would you say, he needs me to stay here? Necesita que me quede aquí. He hopes that I stay here. Espera que me quede aquí. It's important that I stay here. Es importante que me quede aquí. Let's try to work the other angles. How would you simply say, you stay here tonight? Te quedas aquí esta noche. Now let's throw a subjunctive trigger into the mix. He wants you to stay here tonight. Quiere que te quedes aquí esta noche. She stays here tomorrow. How would you say that? Se queda aquí mañana. He hopes she stays here tomorrow. Espera que se quede aquí mañana. How do you say we stay here? Nos quedamos aquí. Now say he needs us to stay here. Necesita que nos quedemos aquí. To say one night more would be una noche más. Now say he needs us to stay here one night more. Necesita que nos quedemos aquí una noche más. How do you say they stay with me? Se quedan conmigo. Now say he would like that they stay with me one more night. Le gustaría que se queden conmigo una noche más. So, in summary, it's very easy to be overwhelmed by reflexive verbs in the subjunctive. They look strange and they also carry along these reflexive pronouns with them. Now, this happens when you only look at them on the surface. In order to simplify them, you must look deeper and understand the mechanics of what's going on underneath. In other words, the mechanics of how they work. So they are switching sides, defecting, just like all the other verbs. It's just that they're taking the reflexive pronouns with them, kind of along for the ride. Now remember, as far as pronouns, there's only 4 of them. We have me, meaning myself, te, meaning yourself, and this one, se, which is so powerful, himself, herself, itself, oneself, and themselves, and finally, nos, representing ourselves. If you were at all hesitant through this video, I would like you to watch it again because it's very important that you get comfortable with reflexive verbs, including in the subjunctive. In part 11, I'd like to remind you of the top 10 most commonly used verbs in Spanish. They are ser, estar, tener, hacer, poder, decir, ir, ver, dar, and saber, all of them irregular verbs. And I'd also like to add one more to that list, which is querer. So all in all, we have 11 critical verbs. Now in the subjunctive, we've already looked at ser, which goes to sea, and estar, which goes to esté, and then we have ir, where the sound goes to vaya. So what we need to do is cover the rest. Now, many of these irregular verbs in the subjunctive look quite strange. They look exotic, but they sound great. So I would like you to enjoy getting the opportunity to use these more exotic sounds in Spanish. Let's start. Number 1 on the list is the verb ser, which, as we know, goes to the sound of sea in the subjunctive. So we have sea, seas, sea, seamos, sean. Let's work with it. How would you say, my mom wants me to be a doctor? Mi mamá quiere que sea médico. I don't think you're a sensitive person. The word for sensitive in Spanish is sensible. No creo que seas una persona sensible. I want him to be tall and handsome. The word for handsome is guapo. Quiero que sea alto y guapo. They hope we are strong. Esperan que seamos fuertes. We hope they are friendly. Esperamos que sean amables. Verb number 2 is estar, which, as we know, goes to esté in the subjunctive. So we have esté, estés, esté, estemos, and estén. How would you say, they want me to be here by tomorrow? Quieren que esté aquí para mañana. I don't want you to be depressed today. Here we're talking directly to Maria. No quiero que estés deprimida hoy. She doesn't want him to be shy at the party with her friends. The word for shy is tímido. No quiere que esté tímido en la fiesta con sus amigos. Do you want us to be here for 2 o'clock? ¿Quieres que estemos aquí para las 2? We want the flowers to be on the table. The word for flowers is las flores. Queremos que las flores estén en la mesa. Verb number 3 is tener. Normally we have tengo for I have. However, in the subjunctive, the sound changes to tenga. So running down the list, we have tenga, tengas, tenga, tengamos, tengan. This would be I have, you have, he, she, or it has, we have, and they have in the subjunctive. You can see that the sound is exotic. Tenga. How would you say, do you want me to have the book? ¿Quieres que tenga el libro? It's good that you have it. Es bueno que lo tengas. He's working so that she has everything she needs. Está trabajando para que tenga todo lo que necesita. I don't think we have the keys. No creo que tengamos las llaves. As soon as they have the money, I want to know. Tan pronto como tengan el dinero, quiero saber. Verb number 4 is hacer, and we're used to the sound of hago for I do or I make. In the subjunctive, this changes to haga. So running down the line, we have haga, hagas, haga, hagamos, hagan. Literally, I do, you do, he, she, or it does, we do, and they do. And of course, also for make. How would you say, it's important that I do it every day? Es importante que lo haga todos los días. I need you to do the work by tomorrow. Necesito que hagas el trabajo para mañana. We're not sure that she still does it. No estamos seguros de que lo haga todavía. They want to be here in case we don't do it correctly. Quieren estar aquí en caso de que no lo hagamos correctamente. I hope they do it soon. Espero que lo hagan pronto. Verb 5 is poder. This behaves very regular in the subjunctive. The sound goes to pueda. We can put them side by side. Here you see it conjugated normally, puede, puedes, puede, podemos, and pueden. And on the other side, you can see it defecting over to the other side, pretending as though it were an AR verb. So we have pueda, puedas, pueda, podamos, and puedan. How would you say, it's not true that I can do it? No es cierto que pueda hacerlo. Can you call me as soon as you can, please? Puedes llamarme tan pronto como puedas, por favor? They hope that she can stay here with us tonight. Be careful with this one. Esperan que pueda quedarse aquí con nosotros esta noche. I don't think we can work tomorrow. No creo que podamos trabajar mañana. I want to know when they can see me. Quiero saber cuándo puedan verme. Verb number 6 is decir. In the normal way, we say digo for I say or I tell. In the subjunctive, this sound changes to diga. And this forms a nice little group because we have tengo, going to tenga. Hago, going to haga. And now digo, going to diga. Going down the line, we have diga, digas, diga, digamos, and digan. You can see very clearly that the key sound is diga. How would you say, he wants me to tell you everything that happened? Quiere que te diga todo lo que pasó. I want you to tell me where it is. Quiero que me digas dónde está. It's important she tells him that she loves him. She loves him would be lo ama. Es importante que le diga que lo ama. We're going to leave after we tell them. Vamos a irnos después de que les digamos. Just out of curiosity, how could you avoid using the subjunctive there? How would you say, we're going to leave after telling them? Vamos a irnos después de decirles. I'm going to be satisfied when they finally tell me the truth. The word for satisfied can be contento or contenta. It reminds you of the phrase to be content in English. Voy a estar contento or contenta cuando finalmente me digan la verdad. Verb number 7 is ir, and we've already done a bit of work with this. The sound goes to vaya in the subjunctive. So we have vaya, vayas, vaya, vayamos, and vayan. How would you say, they want me to go to Mexico this summer? This summer would be este verano. Quieren que vaya a México este verano. I would like you to go to the gym more often. The word for gym is gimnasio. Me gustaría que vayas al gimnasio más frecuentemente. She hopes he's going to be here tomorrow for her birthday. Espera que vaya a estar aquí para su cumpleaños mañana. It's not true that we're going to Spain next year. No es cierto que vayamos a España el próximo año. I don't think they're going to buy it today. No creo que vayan a comprarlo hoy. Verb number 8 is ver, to see. In its normal conjugation, we have veo, ves, ve, vemos, and ven. However, the sound in the subjunctive goes to veya. Walking down the line, we have veya, veyas, veya, veyamos, and veyan. The key sound beya being repeated all the way down. This means I see, you see, he, she, it sees, we see, and they see, all in the subjunctive. How would you say, they want me to see it tonight? Quieren que lo vea esta noche. I want you to see the house before I buy it. Be very careful with this one. Quiero que veas la casa antes de que la compre. I told you to be very careful here because we have two verbs in the subjunctive. First of all, we have this trigger, I want that. So, quiero que veas la casa. I want you to see the house. Then it's followed by a second trigger in the subjunctive, before. Antes de que I might buy it. La compre. Try this next one. It's sad that he doesn't see his kids. Es triste que no vea a sus niños. We're not going to buy it until we see it. No vamos a comprarlo hasta que lo veamos. We're not sure they see the situation like us. No estamos seguros de que vean la situación como nosotros. Verb number 9 is dar. Normally, it's conjugated as doy, das, da, damos, and dan. Let's look at it in the subjunctive. It all switches to de, des, de, demos, and den. In one way, it looks strange because of the accents, and in the other way, you can see how it's actually very regular, because dar is an AR verb, das, da, damos, and dan. However, you can see it defecting over to the other side, de, des, de, demos, and den. So we have I give, you give, he, she, or it gives, we give, and they give. Let's practice using it. He's going to finish it when I give him the money. Va terminarlo cuando le dé el dinero. I want you to give the pen to Ana. The pen is la pluma. Quiero que le des la pluma a Ana. He can't leave until she gives him permission. Permission in Spanish is el permiso. No puede salir hasta que le dé el permiso. When we give them the number, they'll call her. Cuando les demos el número, van a llamarle. It's a shame that they don't give you more support. Es una pena or una lástima que no te den más apoyo. Verb number 10 is saber, and it has a great sound in the subjunctive. You hear it used a lot. The sound is sepa. Going down the line, we have sepa, sepas, sepa, sepamos, and sepan. So I know, you know, he, she, or it knows, we know, and they know in the subjunctive. How would you say, it's important I know where to find you? Es importante que sepa dónde encontrarte. I want you to know the truth. Quiero que sepas la verdad. He's going to call her when she knows more information. Make the she explicit. Va a llamarle cuando ella sepa más información. I'm not sure that we know who he is. No estoy seguro o segura de que sepamos quién es. She wants them to know what happened. Quiere que sepan qué pasó. Finally, verb number 11, querer, which is quite like poder because it's very regular in the subjunctive. Normally, we're used to using quiero, quieres, quiere, queremos, and quieren. However, it switches over and defects into quiera, quieras, quiera, queramos, and quieran. These sounds can be a little bit tricky at first. So just like all the others, if you want to stop the slide and rehearse it, do that now. Translate this one. I don't think she wants to live here. No creo que quiera vivir aquí. It's fantastic that you want to continue. The verb to continue is continuar. Es fantástico que quieras continuar. Whenever he wants to do it, I'm ready. Make the he explicit. Cuando él quiera hacerlo, estoy listo o lista. They're going to wait until we want to do it. Van a esperar hasta que queramos hacerlo. We're going to wait until they want to do it. Vamos a esperar hasta que quieran hacerlo. So there you have our 11 critical verbs in the subjunctive. This video was meant to act as a first touch with them and to give you some familiarity. Next up, we're going to run a huge drill on all these verbs in the subjunctive to really help you cement them into your Spanish. Welcome to part 12. What we're going to do is drill these 11 critical verbs in the subjunctive. And the style we're going to use is a rolling drill. What we'll do is first introduce verb 1, which will be ser, and we'll drill that. Then we'll add verb 2, estar, into the mix and drill them again. Then we'll add the third verb, tener, and so forth. We'll keep adding more and more verbs into the mix until we reach number 11, querer. In fact, how would you say that in Spanish? Until we reach number 11. The verb to reach is alcanzar. Hasta que alcancemos número 11. Do you see how the subjunctive is everywhere in Spanish? Just that simple phrase, until we reach number 11. This until is hasta que, triggers the subjunctive with the verb alcanzar. So it's an AR verb and it's switched sides. So instead of alcanzamos, it went to alcancemos. Let's begin with drill 1 and the verb ser. How do you say I am using ser in the subjunctive? Sea. It is. Sea. We are. Seamos. They are. Sean. She is. Sea. You are. Seas. He is. Sea. Now on to drill 2, where we'll introduce the verb estar into the mix. How do you say she is? Esté. She is. Sea. It is. Sea. It is. Esté. He is. Sea. We are. Seamos. I am. Esté. We are. Estemos. You are. Seas. I am. Sea. They are. Estén. You are. Estés. He is. Esté. They are. Sean. Now for drill 3, we'll add the verb tener into the mix. How do you say we are? Seamos. You are. Estés. I have. Tenga. We are. Estemos. He is. Esté. They are. Estén. You have. Tengas. He is. Sea. I am. Esté. You are. Seas. I am. Sea. She is. Sea. It is. Sea. It has. Tenga. We have. Tengamos. It is. Esté. They have. Tengan. He has. Tenga. She is. Esté. They are. Sean. She has. Tenga. Drill 4. We're adding the verb hacer into the mix. We do. Hagamos. They are. Sean. He has. Tenga. You have. Tengas. I am. Esté. I am. Sea. I do. Haga. We are. Estemos. We have. Tengamos. You do. Hagas. She is. Esté. It is. Esté. It does. Haga. They do. Hagan. He does. Haga. It has. Tenga. He is. Esté. I have. Tenga. It is. Sea. You are. Estés. She does. Haga. You are. Seas. They have. Tengan. She is. Sea. They are. Estén. She has. Tenga. We are. Seamos. He is. Sea. Now for drill 5, we're adding the verb poder into the mix. It has. Tenga. It can. Pueda. I can. pueda. She does. Haga. He does. Haga. You do. Hagas. She is. Sea. You are. Seas. It does. Haga. They do. Hagan. I do. Haga. You can. Puedas. He has. Tenga. We have. Tengamos. I am. Sea. I am. Esté. He can. Pueda. We do. Hagamos. We are. Seamos. We are. Estemos. They are. Sean. They have. Tengan. You have. Tengas. It is. Esté. They can. Puedan. You are. Estés. It is. Sea. He is. Sea. She has. Tenga. I have. Tenga. She is. Esté. We can. Podamos. He is. Esté. They are. Estén. She can. Pueda. We have. Tengamos. Now for drill 6, we'll add the verb decir into the mix. He says. Diga. She is. Sea. He has. Tenga. I do. Haga. It says. Diga. They have. Tengan. He is. Sea. We say. Digamos. You do. Hagas. I say. Diga. We are. Estemos. I can. Pueda. She has. Tenga. It has. Tenga. We can. Podamos. You can. Puedas. They are. Sean. It is. Esté. We do. Hagamos. It does. Haga. He does. Haga. It is. Sea. They can. Puedan. He is. Esté. We are. Seamos. It can. pueda. She says, diga. He can, pueda. She is, esté. She does, haga. You say, digas. You are, seas. They do, hagan. They are, estén. I have, tenga. They say, digan. You have, tengas. I am, sea. I am, esté. You are, estés. She can, pueda. In drill 7, we're adding the verb ir into the mix. They are, sean. We say, digamos. They can, puedan. She does, haga. I go, vaya. He does, haga. It can, pueda. It goes, vaya. You do, hagas. You go, vayas. It says, diga. You say, digas. We have, tengamos. We are, seamos. I say, diga. You have, tengas. I am, esté. We can, podamos. You are, seas. It has, tenga. She is, esté. She goes, vaya. You are, estés. She is, sea. She says, diga. It is, sea. You can, puedas. I have, tenga. They say, digan. I do, haga. We do, hagamos. They have, tengan. He has, tenga. He is, sea. He is, esté. They go, vayan. I am, sea. He can, pueda. It does, haga. I can, pueda. We go, vayamos. He says, diga. She has, tenga. He goes. Vaya. We are. Estemos. It is. Esté. They do. Hagan. They are. Estén. She can. Pueda. In drill 8, we're adding the verb ver. She is. Esté. You do. Hagas. She goes. Vaya. We are. Seamos. She sees. Bella. I see. Bella. He can. Pueda. I do. Haga. I go. Vaya. He is. Esté. We see. Veamos. They say. Digan. It goes. Vaya. They see. Vean. I am. Esté. We can. Podamos. You are. Estés. It sees. Bella. We go. Vayamos. He goes. Vaya. It is. Esté. You say. Digas. They have. Tengan. They can. Puedan. We say. Digamos. You go. Vayas. They do. Hagan. It is. Sea. She can. Pueda. You are. Seas. She has. Tenga. He is. Sea. She says. Diga. It has. Tenga. They are. Sean. He says. Diga. I am. Sea. You have. Tengas. They are. Estén. It can. Pueda. She is. Sea. We do. Hagamos. I have. Tenga. He does. Haga. It does. Haga. I say. Diga. They go. Vayan. He has. Tenga. We have. Tengamos. You can. Puedas. She does. Haga. He sees. Bella. It says. Diga. I can. pueda. We are. Estemos. You see. Veas. Now for drill number 9, we're adding in the verb dar. We are. Seamos. She says. Diga. He gives. De. He does. Haga. She goes. Vaya. She has. Tenga. It gives. De. I say. Diga. They are. Estén. They are. Sean. I do. Haga. It can. Pueda. She gives. De. They say. Digan. He has. Tenga. He is. Esté. I can. Pueda. She does. Haga. She is. Sea. He goes. Vaya. They see. Vean. They go. Vayan. He says. Diga. It does. Haga. She can. Pueda. You are. Estés. It goes. Vaya. She sees. Vea. They can. Puedan. He sees. Vea. I am. Esté. We can. Podamos. It sees. Vea. You see. Veas. They do. Hagan. We say. Digamos. You say. Digas. You give. Des. I see. Vea. He is. Sea. It is. Esté. We give. Demos. We see. Veamos. You do. Hagas. We have. Tengamos. They have. Tengan. You go. Vayas. I have. Tenga. I give. De. She is. Esté. It says. Diga. We do. Hagamos. I go. Vaya. You can. Puedas. They give. Den. I am. Sea. We go. Vayamos. It has. Tenga. You have. Tengas. You are. Seas. he can. Pueda, we are. Estemos, it is. Sea. Adding verb number 10 into the mix now, saber. It can. Pueda, he is. Sea, he goes. Vaya, you see. Veas, she knows. Sepa, I say. Diga, you know. Sepas, it is. Sea, she can. Pueda, he is. Esté, he gives. De, we are. Seamos, they are. Estén, it goes. Vaya, they know. Sepan, it is. Esté, it knows. Sepa, they give. Den, I do. Haga, he does. Haga, we say. Digamos, she goes. Vaya, he sees. Bella, I am. Esté, it says. Diga, she sees. Bella, it has. Tenga, I know. Sepa, he has. Tenga, I can. Pueda, you have. Tengas, it sees. Bella, we have. Tengamos, we do. Hagamos, she is. Sea, you are. Seas, it gives. De, we know. Sepamos, you are. Estés, I have. Tenga, you say. Digas, she says. Diga, they have. Tengan, we are. Estemos, it does. Haga, I go. Vaya, she has. Tenga, he says. Diga, she is. Esté, he knows. Sepa, I am. Sea, she does. Haga, she gives. De, they can. Puedan, we give. Demos, you can. Puedas, they are. Sean, I see. Bella, you go. vayas. They say. Digan. They do. Hagan. I give. De. He can. Pueda. They see. Vean. We go. Vayamos. They go. Vayan. We see. Veamos. We can. Podamos. You do. Hagas. You give. Des. For drill 11, we'll add our final verb querer into the mix. We want. Queramos. He knows. Sepa. She has. Tenga. We have. Tengamos. I have. Tenga. You give. Des. She says. Diga. She goes. Vaya. I know. Sepa. They can. Puedan. You want. Quieras. It goes. Vaya. She sees. Bella. I do. Haga. I am. Sea. We are. Seamos. She is. Sea. I am. Esté. We know. Sepamos. They are. Estén. I say. Diga. You are. Seas. We can. Podamos. They go. Vayan. You know. Sepas. I give. De. We go. Vayamos. You say. Digas. They give. Den. She gives. De. He is. Sea. You can. Puedas. They are. Sean. It is. Sea. It wants. Quiera. He says. Diga. She can. Pueda. He goes. Vaya. You are. Estés. It sees. Bella. We say. Digamos. You have. Tengas. It has. Tenga. We are. Estemos. We do. Hagamos. She knows. Sepa. It gives. De. You go. Vayas. It does. Haga. You do. Hagas. She wants. Quiera. He is. Esté. You see. Veas. We give. Demos. It knows. Sepa. It is. Esté. It can. Pueda. He gives. De. I can. Pueda. It says. Diga. We see. Veamos. I go. Vaya. He sees. Vea. He wants. Quiera. I see. Vea. They do. Hagan. She is. Esté. He has. Tenga. They say. Digan. They see. Vean. He does. Haga. She does. Haga. I want. Quiera. He can. Pueda. They want. Quieran. They have. Tengan. They know. Sepan. This drill was one of the longest that we have in the entire course, and you should rinse and repeat it as often as you feel you need to. It's also good to come back to it after a while to check that you are still remembering the subjunctive forms of these 11 critical verbs. Now, you won't master all of these sounds simply through going through a drill. It's really just an introduction so that you can get familiar with them and familiar with the sounds. For them to really stick and for them to become automatic, you have to use them consistently over time. Welcome to part 13. So far, we've spent a total of about 5 hours looking at this topic, and we've covered quite a lot of work. Now, hopefully you have a better understanding than you did before of how it works and when you need to use it. Of course, there's lots more practice coming up in the course because this really is a massive subject and there's still more that I need to teach you about it. The good thing that I would like you to know is that by embracing this subject, you're lifting your Spanish to a new level of expression and a new level of sophistication. Now, if you didn't do that, your ability to communicate would be forever severely limited. So this really is vital work that we're doing now. As always, it's a question of time and practice, and I'm going to make sure that the course gives that to you, because what we want is for the subjunctive in our Spanish to feel not only natural, but also automatic.